Well, good morning, everybody. Today's update, we got to review the weekend weather, which produced some incredibly heavy rains across parts of some key dry areas in the country. We also saw some pretty nasty weather, too. Big hail down here in parts of Oklahoma. But I'm going to get from there into where I think the pattern's going to be going over the next 10 to 15 days, more dominated by the polar jet stream than the subtropical jet stream. But I don't want us to sit on the subtropical jet and not worry about it, because as we continue to see the environment transition into more El Nino dominated for fall and winter, then we're going to have to discuss what that could mean. So we're going to get to that later on, and I got some new long range stuff and some stuff to review in the long range with you. And then as I'm going to finish up today, there's one last thing I'm going to cover, and that is model differences for South America. Had a lot of questions over Twitter about it, so I thought we'd just talk about it. So you've been looking at a map here that shows the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation across the U.S. And so we've got what was Tropical Storm Ophelia dumping a tremendous amount of rain into the Carolinas. We watched this deeper low kind of get out into the plains, get cut off. It's still spinning in through here today in the upper Midwest. And to the south of it, we watched a lot of severe weather over the weekend. Now, on this image, which is mostly a radar-based estimate of precipitation, they do use rain gauges in this, but we do have some contamination in it. What I mean by that is that where there's hail, you tend to get contamination. So I'm thinking about right in this part of Oklahoma, which got hammered. I'll show you that in just a few moments. But a lot of my attention this week is going to be spent on the next kind of deeper trough that's coming into the Pacific Northwest. The next one's going to get cut off in the Pacific Northwest and what it's going to do. But given that we did have a pretty powerful tropical cyclone spin up right off of our coast, let's go have a quick look at rainfall totals really between North and South Carolina and parts of Virginia. I've kind of honed in on the wettest area here. So again, back over the weekend, we've seen now some places pick up 6 to 8 inches of rainfall. There's been quite a bit of flooding in this area. Good news is overall the week goes over a bit drier for this area to give them a chance to recover. And, weighing the good with the bad, this is an area that had been very dry throughout parts of this year, this part of North Carolina getting up into Virginia. Now, since we're thinking about tropical systems, I want to let you know this is the latest update. We have a new named system named Philippe. Was named over the weekend. There's a system in the Gulf that could get going, but it is not right now the type that has the look of making the turn north. So I'm not overly concerned about this. The next one called Invest 91L, that's just the next system we're out there looking at. It's got an 80% chance of getting going. Should it get going, it would get the name Rena, which, by the way, Rena is a newer name on the list. After we retired Hurricane Rita, Rena was the substitute name there that came in. So just taking a look at Philippe, just to kind of see where it's expected to go. Notice it is expected to stay at tropical storm strength. Here's some of the latest models spread on this. What's quite impressive is that when we get out there about 3 to 5 days, this is a 5-day forecast. In fact, let me take you out there to 7 days. The spread on where Philippe could go is incredibly large. So I think the main takeaway here is that I don't have a lot of evidence to support Philippe strengthening and becoming an event that's going to hit the U.S. And I think one of the big reasons for that is when we get out there about a week from now, yes, most of the action is going to be in the polar branch of the jet stream. That's the one that's farther to the north. But we're going to start to see some more flow coming out of the subtropical jet that's going to help. And you're going to see here in a few moments as I give you the forecast, a lot of deep convection right in through this area, getting over Florida. Very wet weather in there. I think that's going to be a deterrent for keeping Philippe away. Okay, so we'll take a look at that again in a few seconds. But I did mention some hail over the weekend, and just taking a look here at maximum estimated hail size from the 22nd now early to the morning of the 25th. And again, look at the size of some of these storms going through the plains. In fact, these down here and right here in Oklahoma, I saw some pictures and videos of hailstones that were 3 to 4 inches in diameter coming out of Henrietta, right in here in this part of Oklahoma. If you want, go to my Twitter feed. I liked a bunch of the pictures of all of that if you want to see them. Just a good way to have a look here. And remember, with this low pressure system that came through and is sitting and spinning, here we had a bit of cold air on the backside, and it dumped some snow right here into Yellowstone and surrounding areas. So some places picking up several inches of snow, and with the depth of the next trough coming into the west, there's going to be more snow to be talking about here as well. But bigger picture, if I just come back to the beginning, all right, this is where we saw precipitation over the weekend. What it did was this. This was last Thursday's 100 centimeter soil moisture percentile map from NASA. Remember, this is modeled data. So what we're looking at here is the top 40 inches and where the moisture is and where it isn't. So we know that so much of the Midwest, the Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio basins, we've been talking about it for weeks, has been very dry. This was an area that was dry last Thursday, and so was this. Now take a look. This is where the moisture came in. 1, 2, 3. Those areas that were very, very dry. So what has happened since then is that our 40-inch or 100-centimeter soil moisture data went from looking like this to this. And these are the kind of systematic improvements we need to be seeing throughout the month of October to kind of get us away from seeing extreme fall drought that sometimes carries through winter in places once the soil starts to freeze up. But still, even with all of this rain coming into this area, it's going to take a while to get into the major central United States river systems. And therefore, we're still looking at Mississippi water levels at Memphis at almost 9.5 feet below low stage. We've just been kind of bouncing around down here for the last several days. And that is lower than it was a year ago. Just to kind of make a point, it's about 3 feet lower than it was a year ago right now. But just putting it all into context, we did just finish a season, and the end of summer came this past Saturday. So one thing to remember is our seasons are not equal length. So summer is actually 94 days. It's all due to the fact that our orbit is elliptical, and therefore we move much slower when we're farthest from the sun, which is during the northern hemisphere summer. During winter, when we're closer to the sun, the speed goes faster. So winter is actually our shortest season. So if we take a look at the summer statistics, this map does actually not offer much information. Now, it offers a ton of information, but not something that you can look at and then diagnose what happened during a growing season. So for example, look how wet things were in parts of southern Montana while the Golden Triangle was dry. You come over to parts of South Dakota, extremely wet throughout this summer, but it was the timing of this rainfall that was everything. And remember, this includes some of the heavy rainfall we just got this weekend. The upper Midwest, this doesn't really reveal how hard the drought hit at times, especially in late August and early September because of the July rains that did hit parts of Iowa and Minnesota. But remember, those came in with a bunch of severe weather. I don't even think this captures the full depth of the drought that was endured down here from Arizona all the way over to southern Mississippi and Alabama. At times, we were the driest on record down here. But in the west, certainly, we were very dry in the Willamette Valley up to the I-5 corridor. We were very wet in California. We had Hillary go through the deep trough that snuck in here. That was the Burning Man Festival trough. And then, of course, in New England, multiple events producing extremely heavy rainfall in parts of the Northeast. So I just thought I'd walk you around there and show you this, but I want to put it in the context of our newest drought monitor, which we looked at on Friday, but it's just good to see it again. Now, let me give you kind of an idea about what I'm thinking about, and I'll come back to this with the forecast links at the very end. If you said, Eric, what should I expect? We just started fall. Tell me what this is going to look like in spring. All right. If this winter plays out with a dominating El Nino, we get more momentum in the subtropical jet, and we tend to get a split flow coming over the top of it like this. So where do you get to see drought improvement? You're going to see drought improvement here, here, and in the Midwest. It is not the setup to bring drought improvement to the Pacific Northwest. Now remember, El Nino is the underlying factor. Okay? At any given time, its strongest correlation to weather across the United States is maybe a correlation coefficient of 0.3 or 0.4. It's not 0.9. So there will be weeks during which other things dominate, like maybe a polar vortex split, or it might be something with October snowpack in the Sierra Nevada that influences the pattern. Or remember, we still are in hurricane season and typhoon season. Something could come along that overrides what El Nino does, but that's what I just drew for you, what El Nino can typically do. So I need you to stuff that away in the back of your mind while we come through the near-term forecast. I'm going to come back to it here again in a few moments. All right, over the weekend, I did watch some satellite data in Canada. This is yesterday. Now, these fires were way worse on Saturday, but you can see some of the wildfire smoke here. This is Saskatchewan, this is Manitoba, and this is north, pretty far to the north. But if you need evidence of how big those fires were, this is smoke from them from earlier in the weekend coming over parts of the Hudson Bay here. And that smoke tendril kind of goes all the way into parts of New England early this morning. But kind of broadening this out and showing you the next system I'll be watching, it was here. Watch this. This is just a beautiful system curling into the west over the weekend. I could look at, I know I tell you that all the time, but I'm serious. This satellite data is so rich. Look at the transition. Oh, we just got a new image there. Look at the transition, though, from the open-celled convection into the closed cell, the big stratiform layer that's wrapping into the low, and the much deeper cloud field that's out ahead of this. And this is just pumping moisture into the Pacific Northwest. Now, I was talking to some folks in the Pacific Northwest yesterday, and I was just saying, I hope that we are wrong about your winter forecast and that we do get more of these deep coastal lows and we get more of a subtropical influence to hit California as well. But at this point, I think that this might be a winter where there's a scarcity of these types of lows based on what I know today at this point in late September. So let's just kind of broaden it out and get a bigger picture here. And our next animation just shows you the radar over the last 12 hours or so. So this is what's left here of Ophelia. We are still watching quite a bit of isolated convection through Florida. The main front is pushing through this area. Deeper low is coming into the Pacific Northwest. But remember, the low that's out ahead, it's cut off, and it's going to sit and spin for a couple more days through the Midwestern United States. So this morning's newest update here from the WPC on the next 7 days worth of rainfall. Again, this is the slow-moving upper level low. It increased the rainfall totals in the Ohio Valley. We've watched the models put down extremely heavy rainfall in and around Florida. We're dry in New England. We're possibly drier here along the mid-Atlantic and very dry in the Central Plains. But remember, as I've been talking about for the last few weeks, this pattern we are in from now through October is week on, week off, week on, week off for any location. So we are week on for the Pacific Northwest. It'll be week on next week for the Central United States. See how we're doing this? It's a progression of patterns a progression of the pattern moving from west to east across the United States. And the models trended wetter for this whole area last night. So let's go take a look at why. Well, we have this deep low that's currently spinning here, but following it, it may not look like much, is this little short, it doesn't even look like a shortwave here, but it's going to catch the momentum of this trough and get thrown into the Pacific Northwest late this week. And that's going to be the initiation of the next system rolling through the country. Outside of that, there's a large ridge that's spinning over the Hudson Bay, trapping all that smoke. And you can't see it, but, Philippe is way over here off spinning around. So if we go right into what we're expecting today, here is this morning, starting about 9 o'clock, what we're expecting the radar to look like. So as we play through the day today, again, see the upper level low spinning here, isolated showers throughout parts of New England, like into Pennsylvania, storms down south. There will be better chances of isolated storms. Look at that flow coming out of the Gulf here, coming into southern Georgia, coming into the Panhandle as we get our way into tomorrow. And we're going to watch tomorrow afternoon as the upper level low sits and spins in this area, producing isolated showers and potentially some thunderstorms. But meanwhile, a lot of the attention is going to go back to the size of this big upper level low connected to a surface low that's spinning just off the Pacific Northwest. So we'll go from here out over the next 5 days and start to pick this up with the jet stream pattern, because I think this is where the story's told. So here we are on Monday playing forward. There's that deep low. Now watch. See this guy right here? This one's going to just blast through mid to late week and get right into this section of the Pacific Northwest. Meanwhile, out ahead of it, there's the low that's cut off from the flow. So see, the flow is doing this way up here. So this low is not a part of that, which is why it's going to sit and spin over the Midwest for a couple of days. What is absent right now from the pattern is coming from Hawaii into the south. The subtropical jet's not there, but you wait, it's going to come back. Ready? So keep an eye right here. I think this is the biggest feature. From Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday, there it is. It made its debut into the United States, and it's got a kicker behind it. See this? Coming through by Friday. Now, the models have attempted, and they're still doing this today, they did this all weekend, to cut a low off by next weekend. See that? So the jet stream goes up like this. It cuts off a low as the wave breaks over the top of it, and that's going to sit there and spin and give us very stagnant flow through the weekend everywhere I just colored in. But you can see what's going to help move it out of the way. There is a branch of the subtropical jet that's reforming. So by Sunday into Monday, that's going to pair up with the bottom of this, bring it back into the flow, and early next week, eject that low out into the central United States. Okay, so part of it's going to get out there. Now, I know I spent a lot of time on just the jet stream, but that's where the story is told. You can see it now by watching the high-res European model. Ready? Through today into tomorrow. Pesky upper level low here, cut off from the flow. A lot of isolated storms in the southeast, isolated showers in the mid-Atlantic. Deep lows coming in the west coast. So there's the next one by Wednesday. That's the wave that pushes through, that gets kicked forward. And then you know that after Thursday, while we're still watching one low leave, we're going to watch the next one get into the Pacific Northwest and cut itself off. So we're going to go stagnant here, but much deeper flow. Look at that. See it right into there. And it's going to start to spin up and get quite deep and cut off from the flow. So while all of that action is happening here, nothing's going to be going on in this area. Higher pressure this weekend and nicer weather. But we are watching to the south of this whole corridor for a lot of strong thunderstorms, tropical in nature. So this is Sunday, getting into Monday and Tuesday of this week. And then we're going to watch, or next week, excuse me. And then we're going to watch to see how this all ejects to give us a much more active week 2, where I just kind of shaded in here. Okay, so that's your pattern. If we add it all up in terms of snow first, watch when that low. So this is through Thursday. Here comes the cutoff low. That's your weekend. So a lot more snow coming into higher elevation in the mountains. And if we look at total accumulated precipitation from the European model, we get this. So there's your isolated convection here. We're watching the storms today down south. Here's the weak low that's cut off. Isolated showers in New England. Watch the west. Oops, sorry. There comes the wave this weekend, cuts itself off. And then what we're going to see next week is that move out into the plains. All right. So probability maps. Here's your chance over the next 10 days of grabbing an inch. It's highest where we're still watching the moisture come through this morning. It's highest in the Pacific Northwest and down here in the south. But there's a lot of places around the country that are going to be on the drier side of things for the next 7 days to 10 days. Because again, we're week on here. We're week off here. All right. As we stretch it out even farther, though, I see this by day 10. The flow is going to come over a ridge and come into the northwest. Flow like this time of year is not wet, so they go back to the week off. But south of this trough is where the subtropical jet comes in. And you see the ridge that kind of opens up there. This pulls in some Gulf moisture. And we start to see better precipitation in here, which is why we go to week on in the central United States. So do you see the progression of this pattern? I hope that week on, week off idea makes some sense here. On the temperature side of it, we're mainly going to keep our coolest weather to the west. This is Monday's expected high temperatures getting into Tuesday and Wednesday. This is just some rain cool there. I think the models are biased a bit too cool up the East Coast. We're probably going to be 5 to 8 degrees warmer than this. But along the West Coast, by the time we get into Thursday and Friday, there's some pretty cold air that's coming in here for this time of year. Temperatures could be, 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit below average. But by Friday, big warm up in the midsection of the country. There's Saturday's highs getting into next Sunday. So now you can really see it. The low is cut off here. The low comes around and over, just like we thought it would look like for this week when we looked at it last week. Watching the 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies, I don't think we're getting any surprises here. That was day 5 through 10. That was day 0 through 5 right here. This is out to day 5 through 10. Now you can see trough west, ridge east, so much warmer conditions coming in through here to start October, and then we see it transitioning. Now, if that's the case, okay, if that is what I'm truly seeing week on, week off, then this mild pattern will likely not last through the middle of October. What we'll probably see is a shifting around to bring a ridge back in the west and bring cold air through right about the time that's the normal first frost dates for much of the midsection of the United States. So let me make a case for that, do some long range, and then talk about South America and be done. First, on the precip side of this. This is what the early October to early November is looking like. We've now seen a wetter trend west. We've maintained the wetter trend here in the midsection of the country. So that nothing's really changed about that. And as we talked about last Friday, some of the driving factors in this are likely going to be the MJO progression. So coming out of phase 4, getting into phase 6, and eventually coming over to phase 8. And if it does that, remember this. Let's say we get into phase 6 in the first week of October. It may not give us the effect of it until maybe the second or third week of October, when the atmosphere would possibly block up in the west. See, phase 6, when there's an El Nino, likes to put in October high over low in the west coast. So this would be week off in the northwest. But then we'd see a deep trough coming in through here, which could possibly give us our first frost like we would expect in mid-October for much of the Midwest. Okay, so that's what we're seeing. But remember, if the MJO then goes past that over to the West Pacific, we would get back into phase 8. And as we talked about last week, phase 8 is a deep trough here with a blocking ridge over Greenland. So this just sets us up with a lot of activity mid to late month. And that storyline fits well with the fact that we're thinking that mid to late month here is going to go active. With the deep trough in the west, will be active. So you see the bouncing around of this pattern as we go forward. Is there support for this? Yeah. I mean, I think this is all being driven. The undertow is from El Nino. And if we look at our Southern Oscillation Index, which again is a measure of the pressure difference between Tahiti and Darwin, it's got to be below -7, which is right here on the graph. And we are currently at almost -16. So we have that as the undercurrent to this whole pattern. The National Weather Service on Friday updated several of their maps. We talked about this one, which was their newest seasonal drought outlook. They made a major shift, which I think was right, on seeing drought improvement in these areas. But the Pacific Northwest, we don't expect that. They also released their newest one-month outlook. We took a look at this. I'd like to make some changes to this. I do think we start off the month mild here, but we make a mid-month transition to colder weather. And as that transition happens, the West Coast is going to get all the fluctuation in it as well. As a result, I think that this above average precipitation can extend a bit farther like this, and I would not be overly concerned about being too dry in October in the Pacific Northwest. My worry about being dry in the Pacific Northwest is much later in the season, not in the month of October. So to show you that again, this is our newest update from the government. This is October, November, December. Let me rephrase that. November, December, January. And what we get here is that same thing I drew for you 20 minutes ago when we started this video. Strong subtropical jet, a lot of cyclogenesis in this area, but split flow, which is what gives us drier Pacific Northwest. That would be the typical winter pattern, and it's being shown in the models. And December, January, February, it looks the same way. Okay, you got that same look to it. Now on the temperature side, just as a reminder, we are expecting more mild conditions compared to average north. That is typical El Nino. This does not mean it won't be punctuated by something like a polar vortex split or just a deep trough that shows up or a big blocking ridge over Greenland that sends 4 to 5 days of really cold air somewhere in the northern tier of the United States. That happens every winter, okay? It's just overall, we're expecting this. And every long-range model buys into it. That's October, November, December from the European model. This is November, December, January on precipitation, and then December, January, February. And I've said this probably a dozen times, but if you said, Eric, draw me a figure of typical winter precipitation patterns when there's an El Nino, I would draw you this. Little drier risk here, much greater drier risk in the Northwest, wet California, all across the southern tier of the U.S., super active East Coast. That's it. That's what I would draw. And just so you know, the National Multi-Model Ensemble says the same thing. So if something goes against this, it's going to have to override El Nino. But we look for those things. That's why I do the videos every day. All right? Okay. Last thing I want to tell you about is this. Another way to look at that MJO progression from today through the next 15 days is to look at the velocity potentials. And I'm looking specifically at this band right here because this is the progression of the MJO out into the Pacific Ocean. And it suggests that by the time we get through the first couple weeks of October, we're going to be seeing better rising motion over South America. Now, what that means is we're going to start to see the rainfall filling in South America. It's not going to come early this week, but maybe later in the week, better convection filling into this area. So you see that by the time we get into late this week into Saturday, Sunday, that's what the time frame is, we're seeing just better chances of scattered storms in this area. And what's going on is we're getting rid of the flow coming from this direction. It's starting to just move in from a more northeasterly direction, filling that in. Plus, there's a big front down here. Look at the flooding rains in southern Brazil. Do not underestimate the power that these rains are having on agriculture down here. This is a major negative influence. That's too much water in southern Brazil. So that's what I'm expecting to see. I'm expecting to see planting progress take off on forecasts like this. Because right now, this is where we currently sit in Mato Grosso, the biggest producing state. Just for reference, Mato Grosso's here, where we are expecting 40 to 60 millimeters of rainfall in the next 10 days. They are currently ahead of pace, but what's most important is October. So let's just say October starts here and finishes right about there. So 80 to 90% of their total planting happens during this next month. So it will be the rains in here which will ultimately dictate where we go. And if you said, Eric, make a call today, I do not see major rainfall deficits slowing their planting pace down. So I would expect them to stay on the 5-year average or ahead of it to begin. We'll take a look at that as it evolves. But I told you at the beginning I had one thing I want to cover, and that was at the end here, and that was about model differences for South America. And I just want to show you something. I'm going to show you a 5-day sliding window of average precipitation anomalies, and we're going to look at this from the European model first. Now what I want you to notice is, as I play this forward, is that the European ensemble is wetter in through here, isn't it? Okay, so this is part of the evidence I have that we're getting just better moisture into key places like Mato Grosso, which needs to plant right now. It's too wet south. But I can also show you that we have other ensembles to look at, like the GFS. And the criticism came that why am I not using the GFS? Because it's showing a story of dryness. You see how much drier it is? In fact, let me compare apples to apples. This is the 0Z run. There you go. And so the 0Z run was just so very dry in here. And then it tried to bring in moisture late. See that? So I just made a point. I said, well, I tend to trust the European model more, especially in South America, because of its handling of the boundary layer temperature properties, which we know the GFS has a terrible bias with. Soil moisture is handled better by the European model, and its higher resolution, which gives it better chances at capturing the convective events. So no, I don't use the GFS. Even though it is the flagship model for the United States, I don't use it in South America just because of a known weakness. I'm very proud of what the United States has built. Please don't think I'm not. But I'm just going to show you what I think is the best performing, and that's why we're going to look at the European model rather than the GFS in this case. So there we go. Those are some significant differences. But if the European model is right, we're going to get going with planting pretty quickly in South America. All right, I really appreciate you sticking around with me for a long time. There's a lot to cover at transition seasons, and so you have a great week, and we'll talk again in the morning. Thank you.